Hi there, it's Nicole here for Simon Says Stamp, and today's card features the Hope Blooms stamp set, plus the brand new wonky stitches, the rectangles, and the hearts. These are from the Cherished release. The Hope Blooms is from the Mother's Father's Florals release, so all pretty new product, plus one of the brand new sequin sets from the Cherished release at Simon Says Stamp. I went ahead and stamped a bunch of the floral images from Hope Blooms on some Bristol Smooth cardstock using Versamark ink and heat embossing with the Simon Says Stamp Fine Detail White Embossing Powder. These are some scraps of Bristol Smooth cardstock. I always keep my scraps of paper. I kind of just keep them all with the rest of my paper and grab those out when I know I want to do either some ink blending or some zig coloring, something like that with watercolors, because little images like this work perfectly. I do often use more standard size backgrounds, like A2 sized backgrounds, and I usually have leftover little pieces. I keep all of those because for things like this it works perfectly. I am inking up my images, just the whole thing and around them, with distress inks. For the greenery, I'm using Twisted Citron and Mowed Lawn distress inks. For my pink flower, I'm using Picked Raspberry. I'm trying to I don't want any overlap, so I'm trying to be kind of careful. If you even wanted to have maybe a little bit more success, because those ink blending tools, while they're not super huge like the old rectangular style, they still are fairly large, so ink daubers would work good too. I just didn't grab them for this, but I think that might even be a little bit better. There's other things you could use as well. But what you want to do is get the color all the way around the image, because I want the color to go even outside that stamped line. For this particular card, that is totally not going to matter. The little yellow flowers, which ended up being some of my favorites for this card for whatever reason, I just love them, I colored in with squeezed lemonade and then some spiced marmalade for the orange flower and wilted violet for the rest of the floral designs. And I'm just going to color all the rest of these in, and then the great thing about this Hope Bloom stamp set is there's tons of layering stamped images. So there are lots of ways you could use this particular stamp set. I'm going to do tone on tone stamping. I have ink blended over all of these stamped and embossed images with these inks. I'm going to take the exact same colors, so spiced marmalade for orange and picked raspberry for pink and wilted violet for purple, and stamp those accessory or layering images right on top. The Misty is going to come in handy here because it's going to allow me to stamp more than one of these at a time. So I'm going to go ahead and line up my images for the pink flower first, then the purple flowers, and I'll show you what I mean about being able to do more than one at a time. So here's some greenery. I did all the pink flowers and the purple flowers, but I can stamp them at the same time. I'll do even more as I get going. This was more of a trial and error as I got started, so I did a couple, and once I saw that yes, this was going to work, I did like how this looked, I went ahead and did more. So I've got that orange flower, I've got a purple flower, there's even some little teeny tiny dots, circles for the inside of those yellow flowers, which is fantastic. And I have the little cube distress inks, which are great for inking up little pieces, especially multiple different color pieces, with the Misty and then stamping them right on top. This is going to give a very nice, very simple layered look to these flowers. You can even go back in and add flower centers. I'm going to go in and do the same tone on tone thing that I did before, and you can see I accidentally didn't stamp one of those very straight. That's okay. I stamped way more flowers than I needed. A few of these I didn't even use, so that's all right. I tend to do quite a few. Any extras I have, those can be made into additional cards. You could use those on tags. lots and lots of different things. Oftentimes I'll just throw them in a little bin or a little basket, and when I need little accents here and there, I just pull from that. Go ahead and make sure that I get all of the flower and leaf centers inked up. Go ahead and make sure and do both sheets. Like I said, I did way more flowers than what I'm actually going to need for my card. Once the stamping's done, I'm just going to set those aside for a second and go ahead and stamp on this transparency. This is going to be a shaker, and I've die cut a frame using the largest Wonky Stitches rectangle and Wonky Stitches heart. That's going to be the front of the frame, and I've got a piece of transparency that's going to go behind this. Using Greetings from Hope Blooms, I'm going to stamp those with some StazOn ink on my transparency, using the Misty so I can really get a good stamped image here. This piece of transparency will layer behind that opening, and that's kind of what it'll look like, with some flowers along the side and then some beautiful sequins inside of the shaker. I've die cut my flowers now with the Coordinating Hope Blooms dies. And this is a fantastic die set. It comes with all of the layering pieces, all of the big flowers like these here, and just all of the dies that you could possibly need to create some beautiful floral designs. I like to lay out my flowers before I commit to adhering them to the card. So I did a lot of just kind of laying them out, trying different things, seeing what kind of groupings really worked. I want some of the flowers, the majority of the flowers, to be along that left side there, since I've offset my heart to the right. So it's left a nice area for my flower bouquet. But I want a few of those little flowers to scatter throughout. So I'll even have one up kind of in the upper right corner, right on top of the transparency. Since there's nothing actually in the shaker on this particular card, there's no scene or anything like that, it's simply shaker material, you can fill up, add some awesome things to the front of the frame, because it's not going to hinder the view of anything inside. Then starting with my background pieces, so those two big leafy pieces were what I started with first. Then I'm going to go attach both of my largest flowers. I'm using glue dots. This is just my favorite way to do something like this, is to attach them with glue dots. And then I'm going to just build my way out. So starting in the center with the biggest pieces and then work my way out, layering here and there. I think that gives the nicest result, especially for something like a floral bouquet. And the ink layering makes a huge difference in this case, where they're very solid flowers. Just the outline was stamped and embossed, and it adds some nice interest to all of these really pretty flowers. And it also keeps the focal point on the flowers, on that wonderful greeting right there on the card. This also is a fantastic greeting. There's several different smaller phrases that work with the scripty word hope in the Hope Blooms stamp set, so you can put or stamp the kind of sentiment that you want for your card. I'm going to go ahead and attach the transparency to the back of my frame. And I did get it a little offset, so what I'm going to have to do is just trim a little bit of that transparency since it's hanging over. Just snip that along the top real quick. And there's what it looks like. Now I'm going to flip this over and double up some foam tape and adhere this all the way around my opening. On 3 of the sides, there's not enough room for the full width of the foam tape, so it's easiest to go ahead and trim that in half. Plus you get more out of your foam tape by doing it this way. You want to make sure that it butts up next to each other all the way around, so that the shaker material, in this instance the sequins, don't go flying out. When it's a shaped frame for a shaker, I often like to kind of frame it up a little bit so that shaker material doesn't go flying underneath the solid part of the frame front, because you really lose a lot in that instance, and you aren't able to see anything anyway, and you have to fill it with so much more shaker material. I'm framing up just along the bottom edges there with some diagonal foam tape. And then I like to take a powder deactivation tool and run that along the sides. It's going to help the sequins or anything that you put inside, whether it be seed beads or confetti. It'll help it from sticking to the foam tape so bad. Sometimes that kind of material has the tendency to stick, and this just helps kind of keep that shaker material moving around inside the shaker. I went ahead and removed that, filled the shaker with some beautiful sequins, placed a backer on the shaker, and then attached it to a side fold card base, and finished the card with glossy accents in the center of the flowers. Thanks for joining me today for this Hope Blooms shaker card featuring Simon Says stamps and dies. The supplies I used are listed and linked below the video here on YouTube. Here are a couple more videos featuring Simon Says stamps and dies that you might be interested in. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time.